And we're live, so we play the chicken foot sound. It sounds so pathetic. We are the Chicken Foot Podcast. We're here to talk about comedy, to tell funny stories, to try to tell jokes, to get to the bottom of what it takes to be funny, but
Yeah,
in
that's
an
true.
intentional way.
I'm Arthur Spooner. Before we get started, a lot of people don't know that this podcast, the editing and the doing, it takes a lot of funding sometimes. So we have a sponsor today. The sponsor is the Pillow Shaver. Go to bed at night, scruffy. Wake up with a clean shave, the Pillow Shaver. It's a close shave and a close call.
I was going to say, that sounds dangerous.
But that's our sponsor today, the Pillow Shaver. So if you like that idea, then buy the Pillow Shaver.
I don't like that idea. What does it do? What does it do? Like, what if you just sleep on one side? It just munches the shit.
Look, it will shave you a clean shave. I've been really getting ready for it tonight. So we'll see. But that is our sponsor for today is the Pillow Shaver.
Did they send you a free one?
Yeah, I'm going to try it out. And if I'm not here next podcast, you know what happened.
I love it. Well, I'm going to start us off with a joke.
All right.
After that, and then we'll talk about it. All right. All right. Get ready. How do you entertain a bored pharaoh? You sail a boatload of young women dressed only in fishing nets down the Nile and urge the pharaoh to go catch a fish.
You could do that with anything. How does the fisherman catch? How does the fisherman win? I don't understand. Why the pharaoh? Why is that unique?
The reason I use that one is because that is one of the oldest recorded jokes ever. So that is from 1600 BC. So it may not translate very well, but I wanted to bring it up. I wanted to use that joke and see if you laughed. You didn't, obviously. I didn't find it funny. I thought maybe I could tell it in a funny way, but that is one of the oldest jokes. So I looked up what was the oldest joke ever recorded, and that's what we got. There's one from.
I wonder if there's some play on words.
Yeah.
In Egypt that we don't know, because there's a couple things that I know, like we always talk about Adam, the apple, Eve and the apple. Mm-hmm. But in reality, where it started was the word Latin for apple and the word Latin for sin rhymed. Oh. And so they didn't, and not everyone had Bibles back then. So they would tell stories, and apple and sin rhymed together. And so it was a play on words when they said that they ate the apple, is like they ate the fruit for the sin. So I know, like, now people are like, well, it never says apple. What the hell? Or Humpty Dumpty. It never says he's an egg. So, but we always think of him as an egg. So I wonder if there's like a play on words or something.
I am sure there is. I wonder if there, just knowing what we know about rulers, I wonder if there's some kind of like double entendre about prostitutes, fishmongers. A fishmonger used to have that double entendre of a pimp. And so I wonder if there's some kind of like, he really is going and, he's not really, being faithful to the queen or something. I don't know.
Something smells fishy. So it went from a fishmonger to a whoremonger. This is horrible.
I guess. I don't know. I just remember in English class, I remember there's a Shakespearean line that talks about a fishmonger that was a double entendre for, and maybe because of the monger part, I don't know. But I bring it up.
you know, I wish in our school we talked about prostitutes. We never talked about prostitutes in my school.
Let me tell you a funny story. So
All right.
English class. I'm 16 years old. 16 years old, and we are studying Jane. No, Anne Frank. And our English teacher, she was one of the most esteemed English teachers in the local.
Hey, Daniel.
Oh, hey, what's going on? So Daniel Heiniger is checking in. Thanks for showing up, buddy. Appreciate it. So, uh,
So you're in high school.
yeah, she's like a really revered teacher. I go to a private school. She came from like the big public school, so she's just and we take all our AP classes. So we're sitting there in class. She's gonna put in a video about Anne Frank. She pops in the video, goes back to her desk, and she's like kind of talking. Everybody's facing towards her. Me and my buddy Bob Landry, we're just sitting there, just kind of talking and watching the video, and all of a sudden, declarations of pleasure begin, and you start hearing like, I don't want to make the sounds, but you know the sounds,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
Adult
stuff comes on.
entertainment.
Yeah, stuff comes on the screen,
Yeah.
and we're just looking at each other like, do we tell her? Or like, because all of a sudden we're just filled with guilt. We're 16-year-old boys. And we're like, what do we do? And she sees it, and she like goes crazy, and like she's like pounding on it, trying to get it to stop. She's crying, like everybody's like, what's going on? And so it turns out her son, who was like in his mid-20s, had like grabbed one of her tapes and filmed over it, and then I guess put it back.
Oh, well, oh yeah. Oh man, I have a similar story, where, but I won't go in that one. It reminded me of actually two stories, but one of them I won't go into. I'm sure I'll get to another day. But when we were talking about like high school and uh because you were talking about like prostitutes and stuff like that in high school, and I was made the joke, hey, looks like we got somebody else.
Luciano Medallion, what's up, Lou? Good to have you on today, brother.
So when I was in Guam as this Navy social worker, right around the corner from me was the lactation consultant, because the baby unit wasn't too far from there. So she would have people coming in who were having issues with breastfeeding, obviously. And I remember going in there, and she's got all these pictures of boobs, like medical, where it's cut open and you see all the like,
oh yeah,
and everything. And then she's got like other pictures of like Wonder Woman breastfeeding and all these like kind of normalizing it and everything. And I remember sitting thinking, I was talking to her one day, and I remember sitting thinking, I was like, when I was in high school and I was talking to my career counselor, not one time did he ever say, you like boobs? There's a job for boobs. You know what I mean? He was like, do you like construction? Do you like, what do you want to do? Not one time did he ever say boobs.
What do you mean? Like you wanted to be a lactation consultant?
He would have said, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. If he would said, do you like boobs? You could manhandle boobs all day. I would be like, sign me up for that one. But instead, he's like, you know what? Do you like construction? Your hands? So anyways, back to the subject. We were talking about the Pharaoh. The oldest joke was we were talking about prostitution as like the oldest joke in Egypt, one of the oldest jokes ever recorded, right?
Yes. Well, the reason I brought that up is because I wanted to talk. Apparently, so Luciano Medellin. How do you pronounce your name? Help me out, Luciano, because Dan Heiniger says excuse his pronunciation of your name. I butchered it. Sorry, Luciano. All right. we'll call him good old Lou. Um, so I brought up the joke, the oldest joke that is on record is so how's it go? Let me read it again. How do you entertain a bored pharaoh? You sail a boatload of young women dressed only in fishing nets down the Nile and urge the pharaoh to go catch a fish.
Yeah. All right.
And so that's the oldest recorded joke. Obviously, it's got, you were saying it has got to have some double entendres. And I was just, so you brought up, what do you think? What is the primal?
Well, timing has something to do with it, and you're about like 10,000 years too late on that one.
What do you mean? Oh.
So to me, when I think of like the most primal or the basic thing that people think is funny, like the first thing that people laughed at, like first thing is either tripping, like somebody falling and hurting themselves, or flatulence. Like, yeah.
Oh. Well,
If you're
that's interesting because the article does talk about flatulence as being one of the earliest jokes. They just can't find it recorded anywhere, but it talks about something which never occurred since time immemorial. Something. A young woman did not fart in her husband's lap.
it's funny is I know people who they get angry when you fart. Like I understand because it smells bad. You
Wait,
don't
when you fight with farts? What'd you
fart
say?
when you fart, right? Some people get really angry when you fart, and I always think like farts are just intrinsically funny. I mean, you get a weird sounding noise, a horrible smell, and it comes out of your butt. That's like the combination for just like a funny. Just the concept is just funny, So I can understand you don't like the smell and you don't like people doing it in your presence, but the idea to me is just like intrinsically funny.
Yeah. Uh, so you're thinking the original comedy surrounded fart jokes. That was the original, and falling. I agree
Fart
with you
and
with falling.
falling. I think tripping, farting, burping had to be that to me probably is the most basic.
Do
The
you know what I
beginning of
think?
humor.
I think the thing that you is
The worst silent but
Lou
deadly.
says worst off is the silent but deadly.
See,
Yeah.
that's why it spread so fast. It's universal language. So it
It
doesn't
really,
matter what language you spoke back then. You'd be like, man, it smells horrible.
you know,
That's the before the love language, the fart language.
but do you know what I think was even more primordial than that was making fun of men. So like saying like you're weak,
Oh, so
you
like kind of
know?
kind of like an ego thing, putting dominance, more of a dominance kind of play power.
Yeah, yeah, because even before the sophistication of a fart,
Mm-hmm.
if there is any sophistication to be had there, I think that the idea, even if of a caveman pointing at another caveman and saying, haha, you can't lift that
He
heavy
farts
thing.
flowers. Well, it's funny because if you really think about it, that's what's more primal than sex and really attracting and a mate. Even like birds and insects, they do things to attract mates. So I wouldn't doubt if like humor started also as like kind of a degrading, kind of like making fun of somebody to try to get that popular. Because I mean, if you think about it, when kids, that's one of the first
Yeah,
things they do is funny, is make fun of people and body functions.
that's true.
Those are the
Yeah,
two very basic things that kids think are funny.
yeah. Well, so Lou made a good point because we all stink, and it's true. I mean, no matter what race, no matter what, like woman, man, whatever, child, adult,
Mm-hmm.
old person, or that's probably not a PC of me.
Yeah. Well, if you think back then, look, they didn't have deodorant, so their body odor is going to be off the wall. Their teeth probably rotten, so their breath probably stank. Their hair is going to be stinky. Feet are going to be stinky. Like every aspect of them stinks.
You're talking about like cavemen, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So the only difference is the fart is directed at somebody. You know what I mean?
Well, and the sound. It has a sound with it.
Sound to it. So it has a funny sounding sound. There's videos I've seen on YouTube where dogs will fart and scare themselves. You ever see those videos where they like fart and scare themselves?
Well, that's the other thing that that we should probably look at primordially, the primitive man or even early man, the edge between, because we talk a lot about how comedy needs a little danger. Mm-hmm. And there's just so much danger back then. It's interesting. So that edge, that line between I'm going to die and I'm going to laugh, I wonder if there was actually more laughter back then. Because sometimes we think of them being very serious, but I wonder if there's just even more laughter because there's just always a sense of danger and always a need for release, a need for an exit, a relief from the stress of life.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of what we talked about once before, is that when I asked my father once when he was getting married, like what he was thinking what happened. Was he crying or whatever? And he said that he just couldn't stop laughing. That his
when he was getting married.
Yeah, because his anxiety was so much that he just started laughing. And then I was saying from that, I wondered if that's really where laughter kind of started, from anxiety, is a release of anxiety. Yeah. So I wonder if, they were more life or death back then.
Yeah.
So being so close to death and anxiety, I wonder if you're right, that maybe humor was a lot more going on than what we think today, because we think humor, we think intellectual.
Yeah.
Because, telling jokes and stories and stuff.
Right.
But, kids can think, like even babies, they laugh and you're like, what is this baby laughing at? But there's something that the baby finds funny intrinsically that the baby will laugh. And you're like, you can't understand what the baby is laughing at.
I think it comes down to one of the major aspects of our quadrilateral of what makes things comedy is that sense of relief.
Mm-hmm.
And Lou says, I thought he was talking about college kids when you were talking about stinky and that does high school kids though, even more so.
They're high school kids. Regressive stage all the way to primordial.
There's a lot of similarities between cave people and high schoolers and college kids too. Yeah. At least for me, when I was a college kid, my goodness. But that aspect of relief, danger creates comedy, which is weird, but it's the relief from danger creates a release of comedy in almost any case. And I can totally see early man being like, that didn't kill you. That came so close to killing you.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the show or the movie, or actually they made a cartoon show out of it? It's a cartoon movie, but The Croods?
No, but I know, what's his name?
Nicolas Cage. He plays the dad. He does the voice of the dad in the movie. And there is some really amazing comedy when it comes to the simplicity of caveman issues.
Yeah. Well, there's an old movie, I think it's called Caveman. I remember watching as a kid, and it was a comedy. And all I remember is this guy runs around the rock and he falls off into a huge pile of dinosaur poop. And like everybody's laughing at him. He's like, can't get out of the dinosaur poop. He's like overwhelmed. But the quadrilateral, just to bring it up, is the four aspects is one is surprise, right? a cultural. There has to be some connection. People understand culturally that people
Yeah.
have a common understanding, a safety or a escalating of tension or a danger or safety issue, and then a de-escalating or a release. And those
Yes.
are the four areas we defined as what makes something funny. And I think you're right. I mean, part of what is humorous is that it was kind of threatening to your ego or to your life, or you were scared at one moment, like if you trip and fall, and then you realize that you're safe. And it's like a
Yes.
release where you're like, ah. So
This is what I have. Cultural environment, common language, and then well, it doesn't break
I
it
guess
up like.
common language would be in the cultural
Yeah, I
environment.
think there's like two
Surprise,
aspects.
unexpected, yeah.
Surprise, unexpected is the other one. Irony, break in emotion, like a sudden shift in emotion. So that
Yeah,
would be going from scared to relieved,
yeah.
safety, tension, that tension, safety, break. And then I also have self deprecation and exaggeration.
I put a comment. So, Encino Man, I remember that one. Brandon
Oh,
Fraser.
yeah, Polly
Yeah.
Shore. Whatever happened to Polly
And
Shore?
in the Wheezin.
Yeah,
Well,
he was.
his parents started the Comedy Store, the Laugh Factor or the
Oh.
Comedy Store, and he owns it now. So he kind of is
Oh.
still there, but it's almost 8 minutes till the end. So
Okay.
now story time. So we talked about primitives, stories. We also talked about like it reminded me of like a kids because we talked about how a kid's humor is like
Yeah.
really primitive, and it reminded me of when me and my brother and older brother and younger sister were kids. And so we used to do this thing, and my poor mom, like everyone in the family just told jokes. My mom somehow ended up as the butt of the joke a lot. And so what we used to do is like, in cartoons where like the wind would be blowing and they'd be holding on like,
Yeah,
"Ah,"
yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
so we would do that. Like we'd be in a grocery store and then we'd be like picking on each other or something like, oh man, you did this and this, but oh, leave me alone and stuff like that. And then my mom would be like, I said stop, and we would go, whoa, like hold on to the shelves and stuff, whoa, and then we'd be rolling down the aisle. You're like, whoa, we'd be like, G forces. And so people would turn around the corner and you see this my mom irritated just like walking and then three kids behind her rolling like whoa like G forces. You know what I mean? So I remember one time at dinner we're sitting there and we're all eating and stuff, and the way the setup was is my dad would always be at one end and my mom be on the other, and we were sitting there eating,
Yeah.
and my mom and my dad were having an argument about something, and my dad kept saying something. She said, "I said stop," and she's like, and he picks up his plate and his fork. He goes, "Whoa!" And he picks up his drink. He's like, "Whoa!" And we just all start dying laughing. And my mom just got up and left the table, and we're all laughing. And my dad's just like, "Come on, baby, I'm just kidding."
Well, both you and I, and actually Dan, are counselors by trade, and I wonder. I would like to talk more about a father's role in comedy because there's something very. Oh, let me put. There's something very tied in between specific to a father or males in general and comedy.
Yeah.
And me and you have had discussions before of like, why is it that women have a harder time with comedy or getting our comedy, or even being comics? You see much more men and just trying to see like what is the evolutionary idea there or the but
Well,
I would Yeah.
Well, I know many times I've heard many people say that they always try to make their father laugh. That was like they
Mm.
always try to do that, and there's something really gratifying if you can make your father laugh.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
We started talking about Jim Pritchett says he's an old friend from YouTube and a good friend on Facebook says dad jokes.
yeah, total dad
Exactly.
joke.
I mean, that's so dad jokes. Like you say, dad jokes. Everybody knows what you're talking about. It's
Yeah.
like dads. So I want to talk more about it. We're running out of time.
Well, if I were to just throw one thought in the
Yeah.
dad jokes are so simple that kids can understand them. But it's like the beginning of intellectual humor for them. But we see them
Mm,
as being intellectually low because they're very basic and stuff. But that's what kids I think find funny is that usually kids is bodily functions or slapstick kind of stuff. But then the dad jokes, it's kind of like that's begins to open their idea of like play on words and
mm,
irony and
yes.
sarcasm and stuff. And so I wonder if that's like the beginning of the development of kids understanding or expanding their idea of what is funny.
Absolutely. Uh, I did a big paper in school on the importance of dads and social competence. And I want to think more and talk more about this in a podcast about how dads use comedy to soften the danger of separating from mom. Because, dads are really instrumental in that pulling children away from their mom, men in general, pulling younger people away from that safety of the home, the
Mhm.
motherly protection.
Yeah.
So anyways, I think that's an interesting avenue to go to and explore further. But I like this discussion on the primor
Audio.
yeah, primal
Where
comedy.
did it come from? Yeah, I'm sure we'll touch on this again because it'd be interesting to see all the humor throughout the years. I'm sure there's books on it.
Yeah.
What people considered as funny, and because it's interesting how things have changed. Because one thing I remember from like I learned a little bit about like art history is that when you look at like uh, you look at Michelangelo and how the women had like smaller boobs and the
Mm.
men's penis are always like really small. Back then, they thought it was more masculine to have a smaller penis and women to have
Mm.
smaller breasts, so it wasn't as
Interesting.
cumbersome. Which is weird
Uh,
because now we're like the opposite. Because
yeah.
I think we remembered we talked about once why like because boobs and schlongs those are funny names because it's kind of like outside the body and floppy
Mm-hmm.
and silly and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. And
Mm-hmm.
who is Benny?
Benny Hill?
Is that is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he always does like that kind of crude humor where it's got busty women running around
Mm-hmm.
and flopping
Mm-hmm.
around. And I remember 80s was all about like that kind of humor too,
Yeah.
like Porky's and stuff like that. Uh,
Yeah.
but anyways,
Well, it's been an interesting conversation. Thank you, Jim and Dan and Lou, for showing up. Michael, too, I think. And just encourage you guys to show back up on every. Oh, wait. So Jim has a comment. He said, Schlorts were manly. What is a schlort?
I don't know.
Oh, it's a short schlonger. I love it. Thanks, Jim.
Well, before we close, I want to remind everyone this episode of the podcast is sponsored by the Pillow Shaver. Go to bed at night scruffy, wake up with a clean shave. Remember, it's a close shave and a close call.
Thank you, Pillow Shaver.
For sponsoring